This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We offer our deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
This episode is sponsored by my new single, Really You're a Nice Kid. Listen at the end of this episode or check it out on your favourite streaming platform by searching Really You're a Nice Kid by Rosalind. We all misbehave sometimes. Wanna change the world, indulge in some bad behavior. Hello and welcome to Bad Behavior. My name is Rosalind.
And my name is Nicola.
Yay, welcome! Come in, sit down, gather round. Nicola, I have a question. I would like you to tell me a secret.
Oh, goodness. Wow, you've really caught me off guard there.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot for science and entertainment.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I can certainly step up to that task. Let me think of a secret. I would classify myself as like a blabby type of person, so I talk a lot of shit, so not much is kept a secret.
Is blabby type of person the technical term?
Blabby, that's a disgusting word. I can't believe I referred to myself as blabby. You know what I meant? Like someone who just...
A bit of a chatterbox, a bit of an open
A
book.
chatterbox, that's exactly what I meant. That was the word that I wanted.
Which is quite helpful when making a podcast.
It certainly is. I mean, maybe it isn't though, because all your chatterbox moments are immortalized in little sound bites on the internet. So
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword. Anyways, back to my secret. I need to think of one. Oh, Roz, are you asking me a secret with a secret of mine in mind?
Oh, that would have been clever.
That would have.
That would have been the better way to arrange this conversation, but no. This is a confession time. You know, it doesn't matter if I know it.
Okay.
What have you got? What's on your chest right now?
Damn, I wish my life was more interesting. In moments like these, I really wish I had a couple of good secrets.
I have a confession.
Yes, please, tell me.
It's not good. It's just on the top of my head. I want to preface it with that. But my secret is that I deleted my Bumble account.
Ooh.
I then took 2 hours away and downloaded not only Bumble, but Hinge, Her, OkCupid, and Tinder.
Wow. Damn, you were in a pit of shame, weren't you? That was one mass download of all dating apps.
So I now have accounts on all of those, and I was only away from Bumble for 2 hours.
You know what?
Thank you very much.
I release you from that confession because haven't we all done the hate delete and the impulse download again and again? I do it every single time that I feel slightly lonely. I re-download Tinder and then I'm faced with the limitations of that disgusting app and then I proceed to delete it again. So you're totally fine. Okay, well, I would say my confession is that I'm currently on a week off and I've checked my work email a lot.
No!
I know. And you tell me always not to do it.
Boundaries, dude.
Yeah, I don't know why I am so obsessed with being a cog in the capitalist machine, but I just, I took kind of a risk with taking time off during lockdown as well because there's nothing to do. So I'm literally in the same room that I work in. So I feel like my brain hasn't quite adjusted to the fact that it can relax. It's a bit confused.
You should play dress up with yourself. Dress for the day you want, not the day you have. Right? So you wake up and you go, normally I'd sit in my pajamas and maybe put on a jumper to hide the fact that I'm wearing what I slept in for my first meeting of the day, right?
100%. Yeah, that's a vibe.
But instead, you woke up and you've got the whole day to yourself. You're not working. So what do? You go put on your princess ball gown and you eat cheese or whatever it is
Yes.
that makes you feel royal, and then your day is set.
Okay.
You know, dress for the day you want.
Every couple of months, I think of throwing out everything I own and, becoming a minimalist. But then when I had that thought recently, I was like, well, I don't even know what to throw out anymore because I haven't had
A chance to wear it.
exactly. So I do.
Yeah, you don't know who you are anymore. You haven't expressed yourself.
I feel like I'm floating in space, like, and with all these beautiful gowns. And when I say
Beautiful
gowns, I mean my thrifty.
Skinny jeans
Yeah.
and a nice kimono.
Oh, I love a good kimono.
Well, look, Nicola will dress how she wants to see the day progress, and we'll put it on our Instagram story.
Oh wow, that is a big.
Accountability.
That's a big piece of accountability right there. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. You have my word.
Yay! Well, you can find us at Bad Behavior Podcast on Instagram, where you will see, how Nicola wants to present herself. There we go. Well, great. Let's get cracking on this episode.
Lilia Tawara is a writer, public speaker, and anti-abuse advocate, known for her viral TED Talk, I Grew Up in a Cult, It Was Heaven and Hell, and for her #1 best-selling memoir, Daughter of Gloriavale, My Life in a Religious Cult. Listeners are advised that this episode contains references to abuse.
My name's Lilia Tawara. I like to include my middle name because I chose it myself. So that's Lilia Te Aroha Tawara. And I'm a Māori New Zealander and I live in Christchurch. Yeah, I'm a writer and a public speaker. I especially advocate against domestic violence and childhood abuse. And I work specifically in helping social influencers who are advocating these social change causes and teaching them how to build their brands and their businesses through storytelling.
Amazing. What does your middle name mean? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it means the great love. So aroha is love in Māori. But Māori is very contextual. It can mean confident love, brave love. So it was something that I just felt was like regaining a piece of my identity when I chose to take that name. So I grew up in a extreme conservative Christian church. And the reason that I today call this church a cult is because it has isolated itself from all of the other main Christian denominations. And that is one of the sort of the biggest things that a cult tends to does is it comes out from all of those other churches and isolates itself. The cult I was born into, and I think this is really important for my listeners, like I didn't choose to join the Gloriavale cult. I was born into it. So their lifestyle was the only way of life I'd ever known. So I grew up in a valley on the west coast of New Zealand, South Island, and the Gloriavale Community Church owns 2 sections of land on either side of the river. They migrated from at Oxford, Rangiora way near Christchurch to the west coast to become farmers and to have a place to build their compound or their commune. So we lived in hostels. I lived in 1 bedroom with my entire family on a floor that housed about probably 15 other families off the top of my head, and that was just 1 floor of the hostels. So the hostels were 3 floors high. I never really came out into the outside world outside Gloriavale. I wore the Gloriavale uniform. All the women wear a long blue dress and they wear a head covering, a white headscarf to show their submission to men and to God. And all the men wear a uniform as well, blue shirt and blue pants. The schooling is all on campus as well, right there. So I went to Gloriavale School and we ate our meals together in a big mess hall as well. So we grew up in a very community sense. I remember my cousins were pretty much my sisters and brothers. They lived in the room next to me. So if you just imagine your life today, wherever you're living, and then imagine all the people you love and they all move in with you and you live in a massive big house, like a massive big family. That was my life. And we all believed in conservative Christianity as taught by my grandfather. So Gloriavale was founded by my grandfather, Hopeful Christian. His born name was Neville Cooper, but he changed it to Hopeful Christian. I think probably the best way for people to learn more about my story and to really get a picture of what life was like living in Gloriavale would be to visit YouTube and watch my TED Talk. It's called I Grew Up in a Cult. It was Heaven and Hell. And that really details what life was like living in Gloriavale. And also to read my book, Daughter of Gloriavale, My Life in a Religious Cult. And that's really going to be a starting point for anyone who wants to know more about this way of life and how I was raised and more about my story.
Great, thank you. To our listeners, I have watched the TED Talk. It's how we originally found Lilia, and her book is incredible, so definitely going to second that.
Oh, good.
You decided to leave Gloriavale, which was obviously a huge decision considering you'd grown up there. What was the shift in your beliefs that led to you leaving?
I would say that it was what was important to me and what was becoming more important to me than my religion. So as a girl growing up in Gloriavale, I was taught conservative Christianity from the moment I could walk. Probably earlier than that, because I've probably been listening to it from my mother's belly. I grew up, I was baptized into the church, eventually ended up becoming a member of the church. So you become an accepted member when you get baptized, and then you can participate in like the breaking of bread and wine, which is a symbolic ritual to celebrate the death of Jesus Christ. And I was like growing up into this world where the only influence that on my beliefs was what Gloriavale was allowing. And it's important to know that Gloriavale does not have any contact with the outside world. They do in terms of like needing to have business relationships, but it's extremely isolated. It's like you're living in a bubble and the outside world almost doesn't exist. You're taught that everyone outside of Gloriavale is sinners, that the world is coming to an end. It's definitely a doomsday cult. And for me, it was also, there were things that were troubling about Christianity. And as I was growing into my own and developing my own inner voice, that was when I started to question those things. And namely around my grandfather, who was the cult leader. He was very much my way or the highway type of guy. And he was sexist. He believed women were the lesser sex, men were to be leaders. And if you didn't do it his way, then you got kicked out. So Gloriavale separated a lot of families because people who didn't agree with the beliefs in Gloriavale were shunned, excommunicated, socially isolated. And that happened to my family. When my older siblings, when they were 15, two of my older siblings, they ran away from Gloriavale. I was thinking on this last night, I actually remember sitting in the hostel looking out over the Gloriavale paddocks and pastures. And I remember just missing my siblings badly, missing them and feeling so sad. And at the time I was like 11. And I don't remember being able to grieve their loss because the church said that they were sinners and they were no longer my family, and I was not allowed to pray for them or think of them kindly. We had to burn their photographs. And I remember I had this sweater of my brother's that he would wear all the time. And I would take that out when I would feel like I was missing him and wear it because it reminded me of him. So there was this deep sense of loss of family. And later in life, my parents decided that they were actually going to reconnect with my siblings who'd left. And through this, I was able to rebuild my relationships with those siblings. And ultimately it was that, like, having your family together and wanting to be together as a whole family was the reason that I decided to leave Gloriavale.
So I read your book, which was amazing, as I said, and I've read a few other books about people who have left cults. It's something that when I was sort of working through my own beliefs from childhood, it was something I found really helpful and interesting in a strange way. So I also read Megan Phelps-Roper's book, who was from the Westboro Baptist Church and left. And both of you do talk about things like that big shift and the sort of core belief systems that need to be, unlearned. And when you leave, it must be really difficult to navigate that belief system shifting and changing emotionally. How did you navigate that?
I think it's that old saying, like a journey starts with one single step. I get a lot of questions from people on social media, and the biggest question I get is, what are your beliefs now? Are you still a Christian? And my answer to that is always, there's not a simple answer to that, because I no longer believe in the Christian God, but I've gone through a complex personal reflection, identity crisis, searching for who I am, mental health challenges, like to come to a place in my life where I am grounded in what I now believe. And a lot of that was getting rid of all the crap that I'd been taught about the world. Like, I was taught men were superior to women and women weren't to be leaders. And like, now I don't believe that, but that didn't happen overnight, and the habits of a lifetime don't change overnight. I still have beliefs now today that I'm questioning. I don't think there's often these massive shifts that we talk about so much as there are micro changes to our beliefs and curiosity and questioning about the way we think about the world. And it takes an open heart and mind to really look at what you've been taught or what the society around you has simply conditioned you to believe, and the influences of your life, to question those, and then to actually ask for yourself, what do I believe? And what is right? What seems morally right? And our beliefs can always change. And I think that's an important thing to remember, and something I've taken from my experience is that what you think that you know may not be that way.
Absolutely. Have you found that, just living day to day, you still have moments where you realize you believe something you didn't realize you believed? Or
I think it's more like noticing the influences that I was raised around that I was oblivious to. I think gender roles is probably a good one to discuss here, because like, I live in a beautiful, loving relationship with a man who does all the cooking and cleaning. And that wasn't the reality that I was raised in, but it's the life that I live, and it's like what works for us in our home. And I've had to be able to step back and allow him to do those things while finding it very strange, considering that none of the men that I grew up around did those things, and that it was always expected of a woman to do the cleaning, to raise the children, and that a man's job was to earn money and provide, and that was almost the extent of it. And so it's about shifting and changing those beliefs by experiencing a new reality. Often it's not the belief that needs to change first, but it's having an experience of something that shows you what can be different.
So, Roz, I'm interested to know what you think belief is.
Yeah, so am I. I think that I have a complicated relationship to institutionalized religion, and that comes from my experience in Catholic education system growing up queer. I think that kind of speaks for itself. And then on the other hand, I have a story from my mum where I went in to talk to her at age 8, and I said, "Hey mum, we don't have any proof either way, do we?" And she said no. And I said, "Great, I won't worry about it." So I came from very clear agnosticism into Catholic education, growing up with kind of a big identity crisis at the time that really shaped me. That was within a very repressive framework, and I struggled with that a lot. I really embraced the Catholic education system. I was an altar server. I was in a church group. And then later on, I started embracing my mother's spiritual practices within Wiccanism. So when you ask me what I think belief is, there's so much tied into that question. And I think it's pretty indicative of the world we live in. I think a lot of people feel that way because, you know, we're talking to someone who's from a cult. So it really shows this pretty clearly. But belief is tied up in childhood and how you were raised and what you've been taught to believe. And so I guess belief is something that as you grow and change, you get to choose and you get to mold yourself. And that's really beautiful and amazing. But it's also tied to trauma and misunderstanding. And there's so much to unpack in that question. So I'm not sure how to answer that.
The moment Lilia was talking about how experience can shift belief, and it's hard to look back and reflect on moments where your beliefs changed as well, because they're so intrinsic to who you are, and they feel like when your beliefs shift, for me at least, it feels like they were always underneath the surface, like it shifted to something that had always been there. So it's hard to capture that massive change. And you're right as well, when there's trauma involved, it becomes a whole nother level of intricate. And I think, I mean, for me at least, it's really interesting to talk about faith and belief with people who are our age, because it's not a big conversation that a lot of people have. Like, you don't sit down with your friends and talk about religion very often, or like if you believe in God or not. I'm not sure why that's the case.
I think it's pretty hard to have an open discussion about that because it's such a paradigm shift to be able to see from another person's perspective in that way. You know, for me, I consider myself an atheist, which is an anti-theist, and therefore I'm determining what I believe by what I don't believe, you know, whereas other people are sort of determining what they do believe. And then agnostic people might say, I'm not sure what I believe. And so it's kind of hard to have a conversation about something that requires a completely different mindset to understand.
I also don't know a lot of people, like I don't have a circle that is really religious. So, you know, these conversations, they're like really weird for me to navigate. Like I don't know a lot of the cornerstones of the Bible or a lot of religious texts. I feel like I kind of skipped a lot of the basic fundamentals that people learn about faith because I wasn't raised in that type of environment. And I never felt compelled to play catch up because nothing pulled me in any particular direction. So I think it's so interesting to connect with people who are our age about, particularly people who are intensely religious or have been at one point in their life and then kind of shifted, because it definitely is something so outside of my scope of understanding. You know, like my relationship with faith is quite uncomplicated. Like I've been blessed in that way. It's not something that I think about a lot. I don't have a lot of trauma attached to it. It is what it is. And that it's what you were saying, it all has to do with how I was raised.
So Lilia said, you know, sometimes belief shifts are caused by experience, and sometimes you actually need the new experience to be the catalyst for a shift. Nicola, I wondered, do you have any examples of times when an experience had led to a shift in your beliefs?
Yeah, gosh, that's really difficult to reflect on, I think, because it's, my life is definitely scattered with those moments. And I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at identifying them and owning up to them as well, because I think sometimes when you shift your beliefs, it can be an experience that's riddled with a bit of shame, because a lot of times you have to admit that you're wrong, or that something that is at the core of your being isn't serving you anymore, or you need to grow up out of a certain habit or behavior.
Well, I was really resonating to what you said about shifting belief about yourself. I think that, you know, as someone who really prioritizes self-growth as, that's probably something that motivates me the most when I'm curious about something or when I'm deciding to take on a new opportunity or to embrace a change in my circumstances. A lot of what motivates me is self-growth, and that idea that I can continuously change and improve and become more and more self-aware and a better ally to others and a better communicator and all of these things. I have to be someone who embraces that, right? I have to be someone who can say, okay, these experiences that I've had and this knowledge that I'm taking on have to change me and impact me. And therefore, I have to be willing to accept that my beliefs and my understanding of the world will shift due to the knowledge I gain and the experiences I have. But at the same time, that's a really scary thought, because you think your belief shapes who you are in so many ways. If you include values and priorities and, how you interact with others, there's so much a part of that it's scary to say, I was wrong, I have to do better.
I'm thinking as well, it can also be so liberating sometimes as well. Like in the case of Lilia, having experiences that shifted her outside of her scope of understanding is what allowed her to escape. So I was thinking about, for me, how one thing that in the last couple of years, because I also think changing beliefs has to do with unlearning, or as well, like unlearning stuff that you have thought to be true about yourself or that you've kind of stumbled into throughout the years and haven't had to confront. And I think for me, one belief that I've had to let go of in relation to myself is this idea that I'm stupid, that I'm not smart. Because I truly, for most of my life at school, truly believed that I was not intelligent. And that, and it was really, it hurt a lot of my self-confidence, this belief that I think because I was such an extroverted person and I used humor a lot, that I let people kind of push me into that category of not being able to hold my own in discussions and everything. And that belief, the shedding of that belief, has been incredible, because it's allowed me to have confidence when I speak about things and to know that what I contribute to a conversation is valid. Like, it's given me so much hope, and to be able to shed that belief.
It's always irritating and wonderful to hear you tell that story, because I have never thought of you as a stupid person, and it's infuriating that you would have thought that, but at the same time it's wonderful to hear that it's shifted, and to have seen the confidence from that shift.
It hasn't just opened up my own self-confidence, but it's also allowed me to be a lot more accepting as an ally and as a human being to other people and what they can bring outside of conventional, boring intellect.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a really good example, and shows, the incredible things that can happen when you allow a shift to happen. It doesn't have to be death and destruction. It can be really joyful.
There were about 3 families in Gloriavale who were Māori, and we were never allowed to identify as being Māori. Like, the extent of Māori that is spoken in Gloriavale is a few words in kindergarten, just to bring them up to scratch on the New Zealand curriculum requirements. But they believe in oneness. They don't believe in individuality or being different or uniqueness. They believe in, we are all the same, we are all one people. And so their belief system itself essentially strips away any personal identity. For me, growing up, I never associated with being a Māori. And then coming out of Gloriavale as an adult woman, one really healing and grounding aspect for me has been to learn Te Reo Māori. And that was very supportive to me in a time when I was struggling with the world and my place in it, and what relationship I wanted to be in, and like where was I going to live, what did I believe, and having a community that I could identify with simply because I was born a Māori girl has been very healing for me. To see the police cars drive past with the Māori name on is amazing. To go to the libraries and see every single list of directions with te reo written beside it is absolutely affirmative for me as a woman living in New Zealand, and as someone who for her whole life was discriminated against for being a Māori, and who was taught that to identify as being a Māori was simply her being stubborn or independent or not wanting to go along with what the community and God thought was best for her.
Yeah, complete suppression of personal identity. That's something I don't think I've thought of in context of a cult before, which now that you've said it seems obvious to me. But yeah.
Well, if you think about it, like you're made to wear a uniform. If that's not like stripping you of personal expression, what is? And you're not made to wear a uniform just like for when you go to school. It's every moment of every day. The only time you don't wear the uniform is when you lay your head down to sleep. That in itself is just a massive symbol of you don't have an identity here. You are simply a member of this church. Ownership of money is another one as well. Like there's no ownership of money. All the money is kept in communal bank accounts. You can't spend money on things that you like. Everything is rationed out. You get the same as what everyone else gets.
Yeah, it's sort of cookie cutter identity. You know, here you go. This is not only your lived experience, but this is who you are.
This is who you are. This is the gender role you fit into. And if you don't fit into the role that we expect of you as a woman, you will be shamed, humiliated, and kicked out of your community. So think about that for a child and how that would shape their behavior in terms of expressing themselves.
You mentioned that you would consider Gloriavale a doomsday cult, and I'm interested in that idea of fear in belief. I mean, I certainly in a situation where hell was something that we talked about as real. So, you know, many people grow up fearing that it would what it would mean to doubt or question their beliefs that they've been taught, you know, eternal damnation, but also, as you were saying, losing your family and losing connection.
I suffer from panic disorder, anxiety attacks, depression, and like fear all the time. And it's, I'm sure it's a result of me having been raised in like strict conservative religions. I think if we're going to talk about fear, we have to talk about abuse, and we have to talk about abuse of power, because a lot of the time I think like religion can just be a way for people to hide what's really happening. And what's really happening is that fear is being used to control and manipulate people. Like I can only speak from like a personal perspective, is you've got to get really clear on what has happened to you. And that can be like extraordinarily confronting. Like coming to terms with the fact that I had a complex PTSD was really difficult for me. It took like months and months and of me like self-searching. Like as an abuse survivor, you don't think that like what's happened to you is abuse until later on. In hindsight, you look back and you're like, whoa, that wasn't normal. But at the time, it was very normal. It was your reality. And so for me, healing from fear and stripping that away from myself has been healing my abuse trauma. And I think just highlighting the fact that the Christian religion in itself uses fear innately as one of its core doctrines. Like you do wrong, you go to hell. You do good, you go to heaven. Pain and pleasure, fear, reward, like these are like basic means that people have used all throughout history to control and manipulate people. So I think you really have to look at those for what they are in order to bring yourself out of those environments and recover from them. I think it's important to mention too that learning to live with the impact of abuse trauma is huge. In this lifetime, there's not going to be a reality in which I'm not affected by the things that have happened to me and the things that I've seen, the beatings I've received and the ones I've witnessed, the shaming, the humiliation, the absolute stripping away of rights. These are things that will always impact me as a human. And I think integrating trauma is massive as well. Understanding that what happened to you won't go away. It'll always be a part of your makeup, part of your identity. Learning to love it, accept with it, to sit with your fear and emotions. These are all really important for people who've been raised in these kind of environments.
After leaving Gloriavale, obviously this unlearning and this shifting, have you struggled with ideas around sort of just being independent and having to just that's massive to have to understand and decide belief and everything for yourself. Was that something you struggled with when you left?
Yeah, it's interesting because leaving Gloriavale is like leaving, it's like migrating to a different country. I'm like a refugee in my own country. There's so many things to learn and see and do, and it's exciting, because you've never been given these liberties and these freedoms. I would say what was most difficult was me experiencing and exploring those for myself while living with my parents who are still conservative Christian. It has been like I say, the habits of a lifetime don't change overnight. And just because I left Gloriavale, I didn't mean that my family was suddenly different than they were in Gloriavale. My family is in many ways still very much the same, even though they've changed in a lot of ways. So I think that the biggest struggle was really trying to explore the world as a teenager. Things like alcohol, sex, my beliefs, really knowing that a lot of those things didn't line up with my parents' beliefs, and that for me to not follow their religion anymore would bring them up hurt and pain. And so for me, the struggle was to let go of what my parents thought of me and to stand in my own right as an individual and believe what I believed for the reasons that I believed it, and to not carry any hurt or pain that my family might feel around my choices and my beliefs. We were taught love in an environment where love was extremely conditional. Do as I say, I love you. Don't do as I say, I don't love you. And you're not lovable. And so that way of loving has still been prevalent in my family. And for me, it's about acknowledging that my worth and my self-esteem, my lovableness, is not based on someone else's version of what love is and how to love. And it's not conditional either. That would probably be the hardest thing I struggled with.
I'd love to sort of go into that idea of womanhood and femininity when you were growing up. Gloriavale, as you said, had very specific ideas around what womanhood and femininity was and how you express that.
Let's rewind the clock, maybe 300, 500 years, and think about the role of women in that time. And then you probably have a good idea of Gloriavale's perception of women was. Have you read the Shadowhunter series?
It rings a bell, but I don't think so.
Oh, it's this amazing author, but I just read the prequel to it, which is The Infernal Devices, and it's set in London when the women wore bustles and the men wore coats and top hats. And it was interesting because I resonated with a lot of the narratives around marriage and what was proper for a woman, what was honorable and what was not. So in many ways, I would not say that Gloriavale is bad for women so much as I would say they're very, very old school and they live in a different world. And that's not the reality in the world these days. Women have choices. Women have freedom. And the way that society runs is very different now as well. And so my role as a woman was to serve the community and to serve men and to keep myself a virgin until marriage, at which I would then give myself to my husband and he to me. And we would have as many children as God blessed us with, because it is God that openeth and closeth the womb. So there was no birth control in Gloriavale. These are their beliefs. And that was what I perceived my idea of being a good woman, the ideal female in the society I was raised in. Very different to how I live now. I'm an independent woman with my own place. I have a business where I'm actually like sharing my opinion. That's pretty much what I do. And I dress as I please. I do my hair as I please. I wear makeup if I want to, whatever jewelry I desire. Like, I love fashion. And so that's how my identity and my role as a female in society has changed since leaving Gloriavale.
In terms of navigating gender expression and what it means to sort of present as a woman or be a woman in the world, how have you found that changing?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting because I talk to a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community on my social media and that. And this idea around gender is very interesting. Like, I think what's most important for me is like the masculine and feminine energy, and knowing that we can have both, whether you were a born male or female, and understanding how to use both and being comfortable with both, no matter what your expression of that is. I think the biggest thing for me that's changed has been gender roles, and knowing that women are allowed to wear pants. And I just can't stand these sexist expressions like he wears the pants in the relationship, because it instantly puts like the idea of somebody wearing pants, which has typically in the past been a male thing, as having the power. And like, so there's just such an inequality between male and female. And I think it's changing for us as women. I'm in New Zealand and we have a female prime minister, and that's just amazing for us to see a woman in leadership, especially in such trying times, doing a pretty fucking good job too.
I love the idea of you sort of embracing fashion, and that's really intriguing because I feel like everyone has that moment where they go, what am I going to wear? And, you have all those horrible choices in your youth. And of course, with your uniform, there was no sort of expression through fashion and things like that.
For me, using colour has really, as I've healed my trauma, and I would say a definite shift that I've seen is that my clothes have gotten brighter and more colourful. I'm letting that inner child shine through. I'm less afraid to express myself and wear what I want to wear just because I think it's cool. When I came out of Gloriavale, sort of the first thing I started wearing was very similar to what a lot of women on social media and that, where it's like always tight, hugging your body. And that's great. Like, that's absolutely fine. Like, if you've got curves, show your curves, girl, no probs. But also for me now is like the idea of shape and color and what makes you happy. Like, just wearing stuff with beautiful prints and textures and, plaids and florals, and that in itself for me has been another really healing aspect when it comes to identity and understanding, well, who am I and how do I express myself, bring my inner self into my outer self.
When you think of discovering yourself after leaving a cult, you don't always think of the joy that you discover, but I'm sure there's a lot of it.
I love this idea of finding joy through experimenting with gender expression and experimenting with how you present your roles and your part in society and finding joy in fashion. I really resonated with what Lilia was saying, and I was really happy to start thinking about this concept of leaving a cult and then finding joy in these different experiments that you can do with your look. Some days I wake up in the morning and I don't really want to be female presenting. I find it I don't really know how to explain the feeling, but it's a bit of an ick. It's just kind of gross. The idea of dressing up and wearing a dress and putting on heels just doesn't work that day. And I find a lot of power in being able to dress slightly more masculine, wearing pants and maybe baggy clothes and, you know, my docs. And then other days I wake up and I could not be more excited to wear red lipstick and my eyeliner and wear lace and colors, and I wouldn't be seen dead in anything but my high-heeled boots. And so, you know, sometimes playing with expression and gender can be a really empowering and wonderful thing, because you can get in touch with sides of yourself that maybe are hard to express in a stereotypical, conventional gender role. You might not fit that mold, and fashion and experimenting with your look and aesthetic can be a really great way to get in touch with that.
I love that idea as well. I think how you dress is such a cool time capsule of how you're feeling and how you want to present yourself to the world as well, or if you even want to present yourself to the world. It's so cool to hear that that was one of the tools that Lilia used to kind of gain back autonomy over what she had lost throughout the years. So I think it's such a beautiful idea. Do you have something that you wear when you want to feel powerful? Like, do you have a powerful outfit?
Not really.
Neither do I. So that was a useless question.
You do. What are you talking about? Your leather jacket when you have one.
That is true. I do feel very powerful when I'm in a leather jacket. Like, I feel like it just speaks to this bad bitch type of persona that I would love to go out into the world with. So yeah, that is for sure an item that brings me a lot of joy.
I love that you asked me and I answered for you. There is a little bit of me that still struggles with how to dress up when I don't want to present very feminine. I was talking about this with my sister the other day, actually. We were in the car and we were talking about, she's a primary school teacher, and she was talking about a boy in her class who loved to dress up in dresses when they did dress up, and how, you know, part of what she felt she wanted to support him was to just sort of make that really acceptable. Like, he's just dressing as he wants to dress, and that's absolutely fine, and we shouldn't worry about it. We were talking about that because I was saying, you know, what would our lives look like if we had been, I don't think we were raised in a family where that wasn't okay. We played a lot of dress ups and I would play male characters and it was all fine. But it was not fine in the sort of societal sense to go out when you were having a formal event in any way that wasn't hyper feminine, because you put on your best dress and your little socks with the lace on and you did your hair this very specific way of presenting. And so when something big is happening, I always dress that way. And I don't know how to dress any other way because it feels not formal. Like I haven't made an effort if I'm not.
You need a power suit, honestly. You need to get like a golden power suit or something. I can so picture you in a matching blazer and pant combo.
No, I want like dark maroon or like a sort of electric blue velvet.
Yes, women in suits, that is an instant serotonin boost, honestly.
I don't know. I think I need to conquer this because I feel really uncomfortable about the idea of wearing a suit.
I feel uncomfortable about it too, because when you were talking, what I was thinking about was I've not experienced the feeling you're talking about where I don't want to present masculine or feminine. That's not something I've struggled with. But what I do struggle with, I have the resilience to be catcalled. So because I have big boobs as well. So when I wear tops that are low, which I love showing off my titties. Like, talk about having like something that makes you feel good. Like anything that's low cut for me, I feel amazing in. But then I also, there's another piece that comes with that where a lot of the times I just won't, because I cannot be bothered to have people like hypersexualize me because of it. And then I feel there's a part of it too where I'm like, oh, but you chose to wear that. And then it's like the guilt sets in, and it's this whole big circus of emotions. I'm thinking about those moments where like when we get ready to go out together and like you're doing my makeup and like we're both hyping each other up and we have good music on and like we're wearing stuff that's like really revealing and that we feel good in, like that's when it's really incredible. And like, that's when I feel like I've kind of reclaimed that part of my life as well.
Yeah. And how incredible that we have the opportunity to choose and to experiment, you know. I saw a really great, I think it was a meme or something, or a tile someone had made, but it was just some people find power in revealing skin and to wear something a little bit naughty. I say naughty, like promiscuous or whatever it is that you're trying to say. You feel great in it. You just feel like, yeah, here I am and this is what I want to present. And other people find a lot of power in modesty. It's just so wonderful to be able to experiment and to do either, you know? And that's kind of a privilege, because obviously Lilia was not allowed.
There's a lot at stake with gender expression, and definitely there's so much to be joyful about, but yeah, I think that's a good thing to acknowledge as well, is what you said, that it's a privilege to be able to, for you to wake up and be able to choose either way, or for me to go out and wear revealing tops if I want to.
If you're talking about discovering yourself, it's important to talk about sexuality as well. I was raised in an extremely homophobic church, and I still live in a homophobic family. Not all of them, but definitely some, because they believe that homosexuality is wrong. It's a sin. According to their religion, it's a sin. And this is another reason that I'm not Christian, because I don't think it's a sin. Like, I'm a bisexual woman and I'm all the better for it. And it's a part of my identity. It's not something that I chose. Like, I was this way since I was very young. I was attracted to both males and females. I think exploring your sexuality is an important for people wanting to understand their own identity too. That can be very hard, because you can get a lot of backlash and abuse from family members who are still living with a conservative mindset. And so for anyone out there who is struggling with their sexual identity, I'd just like to say to them, like, it's okay to be confused and to not quite know where you stand at the moment. It's okay for you to be on a journey, to be exploring, and also know that, like, you're not alone. There's so many people in the LGBTQ plus community who have been through this and who have had to have difficult conversations with our families about who we are, and who have risked being kicked out of our families, being not allowed to see our siblings because of our sexuality. And it's wrong. It's very wrong, and it's not okay. And I know it's the reality that people deal with. So I just want to let you know there's a huge amount of support and community around who actually do support the expression of one's true sexuality. I have friends who are closeted, friends who are out. Honestly, it's such a shame that almost none of the stories that I hear are good or have been easy for people. Like, we live in such a stigma. And I would really like to see that change.
How was it dating and navigating, you know, all of that belief stuff, and then coming out into sort of society and navigating dating, which must be very, very different?
Dating was hard because I have a lot of childhood abuse trauma as well. There's a lot of things in dating that can be very triggering. And also because I had no one to show me how to, like, or tell me or advise me on dating. Like, my parents had an arranged marriage in Gloriavale. It's not like I was going to go to them and ask for advice when I'm like dating people, especially with my sexuality, because they wouldn't accept it. For me, the most important thing that I've learned around dating has been what I want and what I need are two different things. And that learning to look after myself has changed the people that I'm in a relationship with, because my standards for what I'll accept and put up with have changed. Like treating myself better. If the person who is the core romantic relationship of my life is not treating me better than I treat myself, then that relationship isn't okay. And I've also had to learn that not to overgive. So the way that I was raised in the society, everything was self-sacrifice for others. And that was definitely a mindset that came over into my relationships as well. Overgiving, overexpending myself and my time and my money and my resources for someone because I love them, even when that wasn't being reciprocated, has been a big learning curve for me too. Also setting boundaries, very clear boundaries to keep myself safe. No one taught me how to keep myself safe when I was dating, and no one taught me how to keep myself safe sexually. And I think this is a really big one for girls and boys, young people growing up, and people who are not in a gender neutral, who are gender neutral. I think it's important to learn how to keep yourself safe as well. Using protection, like having access to really good medical care as well. Like this one was huge for me. Like I was never taught go to the doctor if you're sick. I was taught put up with it or you're lacking in faith. And now as an adult, I still, sometimes I'm like, oh, no, I'll be fine. Like I injured my hand at netball the other week and I didn't actually go to the doctor for like 6 weeks. And then I was like, no, this is actually really bad. I need medical attention. But it wasn't my first natural response because I've been taught, she'll be right, mate. Just get on with it. So I think, around dating, it's like keeping yourself safe physically, emotionally, and learning to set some really great boundaries of what is okay and what is not okay with you. Understanding that what's attractive and isn't always the best thing either.
Preach. No, I mean, it's hard enough to navigate things like consent and assertiveness, when you're having sex, like just normally, and then you add these ideas about gender roles and submissiveness to it. I think that would be really difficult to figure that out in such a intimate situation. You've talked so openly about dealing with PTSD and trauma in your life, and you're very open about your experiences, but how do you navigate dealing with it so openly?
How do I navigate sharing openly about it? Yeah, that's a good question. It's about knowing what I need and if I need rest or if I have the capacity to give. Same old story, you cannot give from an empty cup. It's about making sure that my vessel is full, that I'm rested, that I'm not overworking, that treating myself as though I'm an invalid, because this is an injury. Child abuse, trauma, it's injury and it needs to be treated as such. Like if we had a broken hip or a broken foot, we would get medical attention, but we don't respond in that way as quickly as we need to for psychological injury. And so looking at my injury for what it is and understanding that I don't need to have this high functioning lifestyle that is so pushed on social media. Like you've got to grind, you've got to hustle. Like I'm not about that life. That's not the lifestyle that I want. I do what I can as I can. And I say no. So it's again, boundaries about not overgiving. So again, that not overexpending myself for others, about prioritizing care of myself. And as survivors of child abuse, you've got to remember the brain is actually impaired because it was never given the environment in which it could fully develop. And so when you look at yourself like this, your approach is different. You care for yourself more. You put more boundaries in place. You shut down that critical inner voice that says you're lazy if you're not working and hustling and grinding, or you're never going to be successful, or a millionaire, which are all these like ideals that society has set for us. It's really just putting those aside and going, what do I need right now today? What am I capable of? Do I need rest? Do I need a shower or a bath? Do I need a massage? Am I able to take an interview and talk about my trauma?
I've read that you actually returned to Gloriavale to get closure. Did you find it when you went back?
Gloriavale was a part of my life and my home for 18 years. And I wanted to see my family that was there. And I also wanted to see my grandfather. And I think returning as a woman with a different worldview, everything was a bit like the buildings were older, dirtier. Like it wasn't as idealized or sensational as it had been as a child. I was sort of able to look at Gloriavale through different eyes and be like, oh, it's not like everything that I thought it was. And that was quite confronting. And then also just meeting my grandfather again as a outside woman, and how he treated me was quite eye-opening. Like he wouldn't look at me in the eye. He would only talk to the men in our group, so my brothers, and it highlighted for me some of the ways in which he's just so sexist, and that was confronting yet eye-opening again for me to experience that, not just remember it, but to experience it as a grown woman.
So we've mentioned your book, Daughter of Gloriavale, My Life in a Religious Cult, which I said is brilliant. What inspired you to write that?
I remember sitting on my bed watching the latest TV show that had come out about Gloriavale, and it's so difficult when you see your life in your home and the people you love plastered all over TV and criticized and talked about, and then you feel like you don't have a voice about it. And to see the things that you disagree with about what the media is saying, and then also the things that you do agree with, and to not have a voice. And so a lot of it was to help bridge the gap between what the media was showing about Gloriavale and the reality of it for somebody who's lived it. So I wanted to give people a look into what it was like to live in Gloriavale, to be able to experience it, to experience what I did, which is amazing, strong, beautiful, trusting relationships and intimacy with family members. And when I say that, I mean the intimacy of the relationship. It's stronger than blood. And this is, I think, something people don't understand about cults, is that they're so tight-knit because there is a common belief, and it's a very powerful and potent, strong belief as well. I wanted people to understand my life rather than look at my life as though it was a joke, or criticize my life as the weirdos or the funny farm, because we're all just living in a bubble of our own with our own worldview and our own way of seeing things.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Bad Behavior, where we talked to Lilia about her experiences in leaving Gloriavale and all of the things she learned through her incredible life journey. Of course, what she said is very true. You cannot fit a life into an interview, so you should definitely check out her book, Daughter of Gloriavale, My Life in a Religious Cult, and her amazing TED Talk, which I cannot recommend enough.
And while you're at it, check out our Instagram, which is @badbehaviorpodcast, and we'll see you at the next episode.
This episode is sponsored by my new single, Really You're a Nice Kid, which you can find on your favorite streaming platform by searching Really You're a Nice Kid by Rosalind. Or you could just keep listening because we're about to play it now.